Now, it's too little too late. What we must understand is that the foundation is very flawed. The regime in Zimbabwe is a product of a coup d'etat. The regime in Zimbabwe is a product of 37 years of Robert Mugabe. When Mugabe was removed, the system was not changed. The values never changed. There was never any move towards constitutionalism. So the challenge we have in Zimbabwe is very foundational. The regime belongs to the past. They are part of a group of people who do not believe in the rule of law, who do not believe in constitutionalism. So no amount of investigation will change the problems of, number one, the foundation of a coup d'etat, secondly, a flawed and rigged election, and number three, the lack of focus on the economy, the economic mayhem in the country. So we must address the foundational issues of democracy, economic prosperity, and also to say, how do we build new institutions? How do we have new people who are not part of the Mugabe regime to run the country?
We've seen evidence over the last week of some of that brutal security clampdown. People have been raped and beaten and abused. Given what you've been saying, do you think we are sliding towards the bad old days of Robert Mugabe? Are we heading for a situation like that?
We never moved away from Robert Mugabe. That's the problem. In November 2017, we removed Robert Mugabe, the person. We didn't change the system that he created. So the people running Zimbabwe do not know any better. All they know are the methods of Mugabe. All they know are the values and the culture of Robert Mugabe. So there are no surprises there. There was never any shift. There was never any change for the better in Zimbabwe. We must address the foundational matters of allowing the people of Zimbabwe to vote for the people they want. We must allow in Zimbabwe a move towards the rule of law, constitutionalism, new institutions, and new values. The regime in Zimbabwe has never moved away from the values of Robert Mugabe. What happened in 2017 was a false moment, a false consciousness. There was never any change.
So, given what you're saying, is it too simplistic to say that the generals who ousted Mugabe and brought Mnangagwa to power, they're the ones who are actually pulling the strings?
Well, all of them believe in the same thing. The generals, Mnangagwa, Chiwenga, they belong to the same category. There's no difference. These people are a product of the Mugabeism, the values, the culture, the way of governance, which runs Zimbabwe for 37 years. You don't expect anything different from Mnangagwa. You don't expect anything different from this government. What we need to do is to understand that foundationally, the arrangement in Zimbabwe is a product of a coup d'etat. The elections in 2018 were rigged, they were flawed. So you don't expect democracy, you don't expect justice, you don't expect economic prosperity to come from that scenario. We must go back to the drawing table. No surprises in terms of what's going on in the country.
So what should the international community do about Mnangagwa then? He's presented himself as this reformer, hasn't he, as a moderniser. Surely he's better than Mugabe?
No, he's not. They must reject the pretense. They must reject the notion of a new dispensation and urge Zimbabwe as a society to create conditions for free and fair elections. Urge Zimbabweans to reform their politics, to reform their society. In Zimbabwe, of course, we want people to work together to create an environment where we can have free and fair elections, where we can have proper expression in terms of the choices for the people of Zimbabwe. The international community, the British in particular, must not be hoodwinked by this false sense of a new dispensation. No, there's no new dispensation in Zimbabwe. It's the same old scenario, and we need fundamental change. So there must be a movement.
Yeah, how about a unity government then? Is that a potential way forward? After all, we've seen power sharing before in Zimbabwe, haven't we?
What's important is to make sure that Zimbabweans talk to each other, dialogue in Zimbabwe, the opposition, civic society, the ruling party. The outcome could be an inclusive government. The outcome could be an agreement on reforms. The outcome could be some arrangement where we say, let us focus on our country. We can't bicker and talk about an election for 5 years. For 5 years, there must be development in the country. There must be progress. The opposition cannot be crying about a stolen election for 5 years. They must come up with a strategy to say, how do we put our country first? So yes to dialogue, yes to working together among Zimbabweans. Several scenarios. It could be an inclusive government. It could be just an agreement on reforms and changes. Or even what's happening in Kenya, where Odinga and Uhuru appear together and put Kenya before their parties and aspirations. So it's important that, one, there's a commitment to fundamental reforms. Number two, there's commitment to working together. And number three, there's a commitment to addressing the macroeconomic matters in Zimbabwe. The economy is burning in Zimbabwe. We need to resolve matters of the economy collectively as Zimbabweans.
Good of you to take the time to speak to us this afternoon. Arthur Mutambara, former Deputy Prime Minister in Zimbabwe.